Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Conversations Where Health is Wealth. What night is it tonight? It's Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. As always, we're going to go around our esteemed panel doing our great introductions, and remember that no question is too big or too small. Jot your questions right into the chat or send them anonymously, and I see that some people are sending questions anonymously already. So thank you guys so much. We're going to start going right around the table with Dr. 100. That's our very own Dr. Maya Green, aka Dr. 100. Dr. Green?
Good evening. Good evening, community. Congressman Davis and Nikki. I'm excited. I hear there was great conversation at a. I hear there was great conversation earlier today at a press conference, Nikki, that you put together. And gathering community is what we're all about. So I want to hear more about that and more about all the questions community has. Thank you for having me.
Outstanding. Thank you so very much to my colleague that leaves us and going has fun in the sun, but he's hanging out right now. That's our very own Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham?
Thank you, Nikki. You know, you're never too old to have fun. I'm a retired physician. I spent 30 years working in the western suburbs and 2 years in the congressman's office. And it was really an astonishing and eye-opening experience. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here to work with my colleagues and to do my best as I can to answer your questions.
Thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Virginia Knight. She says, evening, everyone, and happy Monday to the man who's the weight loss guru, that family practice doctor, who really believes that he's the Wolfgang Puck of keto. That's our very own Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Hampton?
Thank you, Nikki. And I agree with Dr. Graham that you're never too old to have fun, but it's so much more fun if you can age like wine and do the things that you've always wanted to do as you've aged. So I hope that we'll continue to encourage you on that path. And I'm a family obesity doc and work for Advocate Aurora. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you guys. So looking forward to our conversation.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to the man who is the connoisseur of art, but he has a true background in healthcare. That's our very own Joe Harrington. Joe.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Congressman Davis, for providing this platform. Again, I'm Joe Harrington, retired public health professional, healthcare professional, worked for both the city and state health departments, retired in 2017 as the regional health officer for Cook County.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to the urologist of the stars who hates accolades, but he's hanging out right now someplace else. As you can see, that beautiful water in his background. That's our very own Dr. Mason.
Thank you very much, Nikki, and thank you, Congressman, for the platform. I am in Myrtle Beach right now. I'll be coming back tomorrow, but I had some work that we were doing up here. I'm very happy to be of service to do the work that we're doing here as well as what we do back home. And I look forward to the questions and responses to or as a result of some of the things that we might carry program tonight.
Outstanding, outstanding. To the man who says that I threaten him to be here every Monday, but he's always on time, and that's that retired internist. That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller.
Well, just want to say good evening to everybody. Good evening to my esteemed panelists. Thank you, Congressman Davis and Nikki, for having us and having this forum that give us an opportunity to speak with our community and to answer questions from our community and also just to talk about issues that are important to the health of our community. So I'm glad to be here today, and hopefully we can provide some information and some ideas that will be helpful.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Audrey Jaycox, who's here with us. She says good evening to everyone. To Connie Taylor, who is here, who is saying good evening to everyone just as well. To the man who makes this possible for us each and every Monday night. To the one who teaches us that true wealth is health, the congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, our very own U.S. House of Representatives Representative Danny Davis.
Well, I'm glad to know that Dr. Mason is in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I understand there also was a black beach there also. And when you come back, Dr. Mason, tell us about the black beach. And I understand it's a real, and that there was a time when it was a very popular place that African Americans could go, and they did go. And then things kind of went awry. And there is just so much historical stuff in this country, and so much to be engaged in, so much to learn, so much to do. And I guess the fight goes on because the Supreme Court has snatched away affirmative action as we know it and is attempting to continue to do it. They've changed health in a way, especially when it comes to reproductive health for women. They've changed that, even though we've been doing something for about 50 years. They said we can't do it anymore. And we got a guy running for president under indictment and being indicted again and again and again, and is still the most popular candidate for president of the United States of one of the major two political parties in the country. And so I guess our work is really cut out for us if we intend to go forward, not go backwards. I'm looking forward to going to New Orleans next Monday because I'm going to be at the National Medical Association's event, and they've invited me to participate in the plenary session dealing with sickle cell. And I'm delighted that they are highlighting this disease entity. It's one of the blood disorders that, we're confronted with. And so I look forward to a stimulating discussion this evening. And thank you all very much. I see that water behind Dr. Mason.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Linda Johnson, who's here. She says, good evening to everyone. To Johnny R. Miller, who's here. She says, good evening. To Nellie Purnell, who is here, who also says, good evening. Well, everyone has had the opportunity to go around and kind of lead the conversation for the evening. So, Doug, tonight is your night to lead the conversation for the evening. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Nikki. I guess you started out by saying that the questions are already started coming in. So I don't want to get too far behind. Can we start with some of those questions, please?
Sure. Well, there are some questions that came in about COVID, and people are asking, was COVID really gone? Is there a new vaccine coming out? And is there an update? So those are the list of questions we have. And it's really about 9 questions, and that's what they're circled around. So
before he answers, if I could just say, Nikki, that we had a press conference, of course, I mentioned it, scheduled with Senator Durbin this morning. He couldn't make it because he had COVID. So that kind of answers.
So I guess it's still around.
Yeah. And I can second that. I was gone for 2 weeks on a family vacation, and my oldest daughter and her husband both got COVID too. I did not. So it's still out there. It's probably not as nasty as it was when it started, But the problems are that the vaccinations only last for 6 months. So if you've not kept up with your boosters, 6 months after vaccination, you have virtually no defenses. And even if you've had COVID, you can benefit from a vaccine. But just because you had it doesn't mean you can't get it again, because my daughter got it for the third time. So there will come a vaccine that's coming out in the fall, but it probably will not have the same sets of regulations as the earlier vaccines. And from that, I'm going to ask if any of the other doctors have any other comments.
Yeah, when I think about COVID, it is surreal when you go to clinic, and I was so afraid of it when it first occurred, and now you go to clinic and you don't see a lot of masking anymore. There are a percentage of us who are still wearing masks. I think we're easily transitioning, but it's clearly not a maybe a pandemic in the way that we thought of it previously. But it is absolutely still out there. And my recommendation is to make a decision. Do you feel safer having been protected so far with what you've gotten? Is that going to be enough? Or do you want to continue to add extra layers of protection, understanding that there's risk of vaccinations, just like with anything you take as a pill? For me personally, I tend to prefer to feel safer with taking the risk of the vaccine and getting the newer versions of it as the virus continues to change and mutate. And it's always a personal decision. I just feel better in doing that. And I also know that I will do better if I am as healthy as I can be. So the other part of that equation is, can you be as metabolically healthy as possible? And just have good judgment. So if you are doing something as simple as I literally put sleep at the top of my priority list, making sure I get enough sleep. I stay away from stressful situations. I make sure I eat a certain way. And it's so rare that we're eating in the streets. We tend to eat at home. And I just think that basic common sense approach is going to protect you. But I think it's important that we always think of things from a scientific perspective. I know that some of the political candidates have questioned, how we determine if vaccines are safe. And I don't disagree with that perspective. I do think that we should pause and make sure everything we do on behalf of all the citizens in the world is done the right way. And maybe we do need to take our vaccine safety up a notch. Having said that, the numbers of lives that have been saved because of vaccines is so high, rather you go back to polio or even think about COVID, that it's hard to argue. Again, just as a reminder, within Advocate Health, where I work, when the pandemic was kind of at its peak, 98% of our patients who died were unvaccinated. So I just decided that I want to be in that 2% group that didn't, if I got it. And I just think that's a better approach. I always respect the opinions of others. So I think be an adult, make an adult decision, but do not think that for a moment that the COVID risk is gone. Do not think for a moment that the pneumonia risk is gone. Do not think for a moment that the flu risk is gone. And all of those things kill thousands of people every year. So you make your own decision, but understand that you will do yourself a big advantage. Just pneumonia vaccine, and that's the last thing I'll say. When you take the pneumonia vaccine, you only end up with a couple of vaccines, so it's not that big of a deal. But when you take that, you reduce your risk for pneumonia by 70%. And what people may not know is that when you get COVID, a lot of times you die from pneumonia. Oh, when you get the flu, a lot of times you die from pneumonia. So as a clinician, it's hard for me to think it's logical to ignore what arguably is one of the most innovative technologies ever invented by man, which is vaccines. So I encourage people, and I'll let my colleagues speak to that more.
Yeah, one of the things I would just add is that again, common sense is very important when it comes down to prevention and trying to be healthy. And I think that we have to use common sense, and also, I mean, each individual must also look at what their risk is. There's a, I mean, if you happen to, be receiving chemotherapy, or happen to have certain disease that are causing you to be immune compromised, uh, you know, um, you're not in the same category as a person that has no disease who's otherwise healthy, and you can't. And if you're a senior versus someone who's a teenager, your risks are different. So you have to use common sense and know what category you're in and how that affect the risk of you getting a problem. Plus, what will happen to you if you get infected. As we were saying, people are still getting infected, and I think that if you're a younger person who's healthy, probably that's not it's not as much of a risk of mortality and morbidity as it is if you're an elderly person who happen to have some chronic diseases. So use those, think of it in those terms, and think of what your risk factors are, and use that to determine what you should do, not really what everybody else is doing, but make it personal.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something that Dr. Hampton said. And he talked about the flu and influenza, as you know, in the context of COVID, which is also an infectious disease, and there are vaccines for the flu as well. But I took a quick look, and in 2019, 35,000 people died from the flu, and many of those deaths were avoidable if people had gotten a flu shot. And so I know that people are adverse to getting shots, but there are some vaccines that are available that can prevent you from premature death and morbidity. And so we would encourage everyone to consider strongly taking advantage of them when it's time to have them. As for COVID, we've moved from a pandemic phase where it seemed like it was everywhere. And that's because the numbers are so great, not only here in the United States, but all over the world, to an endemic stage, which is something like the flu, and it's sort of seasonal. So every year you should expect that there's going to be cases of COVID possibly that may get worse in the winter months here in the country. And they're still looking at developing new and better vaccines. And there was and probably is talk about having a vaccine that they can give people that will protect them against both one vaccine that will protect them both against COVID and influenza. That's not yet on the market, but they're working on that. And so you might be able to get one shot in the future and be protected from both influenza and COVID. But until then, you're still at risk. It doesn't mean that you'll get it, but it doesn't mean that you're at no risk. And so some of the things that we were doing before, particularly when if you have some type of conditions, particularly some kind of bronchial conditions or something like that, in certain situations, you probably need to wear a mask just to protect yourself. It's interesting and ironic that the fires in Canada created adverse conditions, where they were encouraging people to wear masks in the city of Chicago if they were in a vulnerable population. So it may have fallen out of favor in a sense. It was never probably pretty popular, but there are reasons and times where people should be wearing a mask. But if nothing more, I personally started to wash my hands a lot more. Every time I go outside, I come back in, I wash my hands. That's when I didn't have a habit like that before COVID, but now if I go anywhere, if I go shopping, as soon as I get back home, the first thing I do is go in the bathroom and wash my hands. So there's some simple things that we can do on a daily basis to lessen the likelihood that we'll get a disease either like the flu or the COVID and get sick and possibly die.
All right. Well, Kata Trust, who's a resident of the Illinois 7th Congressional District and a great friend to the office, says, I also recently had COVID for the first time. So for that question, who says, is COVID still around? Well, yeah, COVID is still here. Tamika Thomas is here, and she says, hey to our uncle, and that's Uncle Terry Mason, that is. And she's also doing roll call of all the people that she has invited who are also tuning in just as well. And she's calling them out. She's calling out Arella Mitchell, Gail Washington, Deborah, I know you're here. I see you. Rosetta Shepherd, who is here. Mary, who is also here. You know, Johnny Farrell says, hi, everyone. She's speaking. Tamika Thomas also is calling on a few more people. April Alexander is here. Also, Dee Dee Moore is here. Sister Bonnie is here, and she says, good evening to everyone who is here. Connie Taylor had a question. She says, how long does the drug Paxlovid protect you from a second occurrence?
Take that one. Oh, we're hip. No, we're hip.
No, I was just going to say that what I know about this drug is that it definitely reduces your risk for getting kind of like the long haulers version by 25% or so. It also reduces your death rate substantially by nearly 50%, and reduces your risk for hospitalization. Now, in terms of the specific answer to that question, I'm not sure I can say it protects you from a second recurrence. But Dr. Mai, you may have more to say. I think you're still going to be at risk for that based on, I think for me, this is more about protecting you from the current infection causing severe harm to your body. Any thoughts?
Agreed. Essentially, when you look at Paxlovid, if people think about the medicine that we get if we get the flu, like you have to give it within 5 days, and the purpose of the medicine is to reduce what we call the sequelae, or the impact of the virus that's already in your body. So vaccines, if you break it up, vaccines are protecting you against future viruses. And what they do is they don't mean you don't get it. That means they reduce your experience, meaning you won't reduce the likelihood that you're going to have a severe course of disease. Vaccines are future. Paxlovid you take after you've gotten it. So Paxlovid, both start with P. Paxlovid is for the virus that's present, right? And so Paxlovid does that if you get it and you get the medicine. If you get COVID, you get the medicine within 5 days. And then we love, that does not mean wait to the 5th day, right? We love it when you come immediately and get it. And it makes sure that this virus that I have, Paxlovid starts with a P, Paxlovid, the virus that I have in the present, does not, it reduces the course, the severity of disease. Now, what does it protect you against? That's a great question. It's not going to protect me against getting future viruses because it starts with a P, so it focuses on the present, right? It's going to protect me against severe outcomes, which means it does protect me against the long-term impact of the COVID virus. So we're hearing about COVID long haulers, COVID, because remember, COVID gets in your body doesn't like it, your body tries to fight it off, but then it leaves all the soldiers and the scarring in your lungs and all this other stuff in your arteries and stuff like that. Then you have long-term impacts of COVID, some people, right? Which is heart disease, lung problems, blood vessel problems, right? Well, if I get Paxlovid for the present, it was like, oh, don't do it. Don't even try it. Pull it back, bring it real back in, and then I don't have the long term. So it won't protect you against getting a virus. If you get the virus and you get Paxlovid for the present virus that you have, it will protect you against the long-term impact that COVID can have. I hope I said that clear.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment and an observation. The long COVID is, for me, is a very interesting term because we've only been talking about COVID since 2019. And so I'm always confused about what long COVID really is, because long COVID can mean that you've had COVID for weeks. It can mean you have COVID for months, and some people have had COVID for years. They've never completely gotten rid of the symptoms. So what we're talking about and what we call long COVID now, we're getting a better understanding of. And I think in 5 to 10 years, if we're still talking about long COVID, it's a different kind of problem. And that's something that's very likely to occur. But it always goes back to the basic message that was already given. there are vaccines available to reduce the likelihood that you'll get it and reduce the likelihood that if you get it, you will die. And I think that's the message we want everybody to take away from this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. And can I dovetail off of that? So thank you for saying that. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to clarify. Long COVID, I like to think of it as, you know how you get the flu or you get a cold, and then you be like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to go where I'm going to go this week. I can go next week. You know how you be like, I don't feel good, but doctor, can you give me a note? Maybe I can go back in 2 days or 5 days and stuff like that. So it's all based on our social structure, right? We think we get a virus, we should be done with it 5, maybe 10 days, and that's it. And the virus is done. It doesn't have any impact on us. We don't have any more problems, right? Long COVID is like 10 days later. Like, you know how people like, I had COVID and I'm still foggy in the brain. I had COVID and then my lungs never fully got back to, my lungs were at 97% functioning, breathing, or I felt like it was at 100. I got COVID. I felt like I was at 30% being able to breathe. And now I'm at 75%. I never got back to that 100 because of the long-term effects that the virus had in your body. It's like when you still experience these symptoms, not necessarily the COVID symptoms when you had active COVID with your body, but when you feel the symptoms of the chronic problems that the scarring of your lungs can have, they call that long COVID. What that means is you don't, when you're experiencing the brain fog, does it mean that you still have COVID in your head? No, it's the long-term sequelae of the long-term problems is what that refers to, not necessarily that you have COVID in your body for a long time. Let me know if I said that clearly. Okay.
Well, I'm going to give you a thumbs up, and I'm going to also pull that back like you did, because I love it. I love it with the hands.
You're trying to do it, pull it back. Don't even try it. You know how don't even try it. Don't think about it. That's what tax is.
All right. Johanna Farrell says, right, pull it back. Johanna Farrell says, still looking for a cure for the common cold. Never going to happen.
Right. So that's a good point. I don't know if that, but I think that's, the common cold is actually, what's common about it is the presence of, somebody said they wash their hands as soon as they get in the house. Was that you, Mr. Harrington? Okay. So the common cold.
Myself and Bill Harrington.
Yeah. So I love that because what's so common about the cold is the fact that 200 to 300 plus germs made it into your body. And so what it's referring to is how common it is for us to put, you want some hand gestures, Nikki? Okay, I got it. So how common it is for 300 plus germs that cause problems to get into our body. So actually, every time I have a cold, it's like a different mixture of all these viruses that are impacting me, right? And so when I think about it, I'm like, common cold, what's common about it is I need to wash my hands more. I need to put, so that's what we call the common cold. So why is it so hard to find a cure or a vaccine against the common cold? It's because it's this mixture of 300, it's 300 of the blue viruses, some green viruses. They're not actually colors. I'm just naming, the groups, blue, green, brown. That's the name of the group I chose. I could have chose 1, 2, 3, whatever. And then the next time I get it, it's yellow, purple, orange group. I have the same symptoms. Why? Because the cold, the symptoms I get when I have a cold are the result of my body trying to fight it off. The body be like, I'm finna burn this out. Hold on. Let me turn up the heat because these viruses clowning. And then I get a fever. When I get a fever, I get release of chemicals, and then I feel icky because my body is like, I'm going to divert all my energy into getting this group of viruses out. So a lot of times you may have the symptoms, but the symptoms are a reflection of your body's doing its job, which is like, I'm going to cook you out. You know what? I'm going to throw you up. You getting out of here. This body ain't big enough for the 300 viruses and then the one of me. So guess what? 300, y'all got to leave. So those are the symptoms that are common when you get a mixture of viruses that cause a cold.
And I'll just
I'd like
go ahead, Doc. You haven't spoken. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I've been having technical difficulties, as you probably noticed. But what I would say is that in addition to all the things that my colleagues have said, I would also like to stress that you need to make sure if you have underlying diseases like diabetes or asthma or any of these other things, that that doesn't mean you don't take care of them too, because these are the things that create other problems. In addition, during the time, we were also recommending people take their vitamin D3 because we don't get enough of that. And it's hard to do that just from sunlight, especially where we live and how much skin we have exposed. So the other things that you want to do is practice good hygiene, whether you have a cold or not. And you want to make sure that any of your underlying medical conditions are still being appropriately managed. And we need to also make certain that we do what we can to keep our weight under control and do those other things. Because remember, most of the people that had a bad time with COVID, including dying, had multiple underlying conditions that made it much more difficult for whatever we did to make the COVID virus go away and leave the person with less of these other problems related to lung scarring and things of that nature, and obesity and diabetes and all these other things. We still got to manage these things, COVID or not.
Outstanding. Well, Nellie Purnell King says, great question, Connie. And great responses. She loves it. Hosea Wilson. Hey, Hosea, how are you? Hosea says, that's helpful, Dr. Maya. So thank you so much, Maya. And Maya, before we go tonight, you got to remind people how to actually wash those hands so they can wash the hands properly. So we got to remind them how to wash the hands. Virginia Knight is here. She says, my grandson thinks I'm different because I also tell him to wash his hands the minute he walks in the bathroom. So it's important to wash your hands. It's so important to wash your hands all the time. Kay Maria says, is there a safe way to naturally lower bad cholesterol levels for a 55 plus woman? Levels were above 199, just had a full physical, and everything was in great numbers except for that area. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first question is to ask yourself, why is your cholesterol high? And I think most of us agree that it's just like heart disease and stroke and many other metabolic health conditions, it's really about inflammation. So, and I always use the example of tuck pointing your brick house. If the cholesterol is the mortar, and you want to tuck point your brick house because you need to have a safe house that's protected, you want to have your so-called LDL cholesterol to protect your house. But what you don't want is that mortar to plaster a brick house. So if you have too much LDL cholesterol and then the good HDL cholesterol takes away the extra mortar that's falling to the grass, then you're going to have an imbalance. Now you have a brick house, which is the equivalent of your arteries covered with cholesterol. But the key is to not focus on the cholesterol. The key is to focus on why do you over mortar your house, and you do that because of inflammation. So if you focus on inflammation and you don't blame the cholesterol, it's just like blaming the fire trucks every time you see a fire. Cholesterol is necessary for your sex hormones, and they actually are designed to protect your body. Now, having said that, the traditional thinking is your cholesterol and your LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, are the focus. But if you search metabolic measures of health, it will say things like your waist circumference, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your triglycerides, and your HDL. So I would prefer that we lean more towards your triglycerides and your HDL. You want that ratio, if you divide them out, to be less than 2. 1 would be optimal. That's a better predictor of your risk for a heart attack. Your blood pressure is 2 times more predictive of a future heart attack than the cholesterol and LDL. And your fasting insulin level is 6.8 times more predictive. So I think that's a better approach. If you say to me, well, what can I do about my cholesterol in spite of everything I just said? There are some supplements you can take. The things that come to mind are omega-3 fish oil, high potency CoQ10. A lot of people take that when they're on a statin to prevent the side effects of a statin. If you can tolerate hot flashes, things like niacin have been used. Red yeast rice can be used as a supplement. However, it does have the same side effects as a statin. And berberine is also very helpful. So there are some things that you can do, but I think it would be a mistake to focus on your total cholesterol and your LDL when you should focus on other markers.
Well, outstanding. So we did get another question that says, what are the side effects of the statins?
So one of the biggest side effects of the statins is muscles. People get a lot of muscle aches and cramps. It's probably the biggest reason why statins are discontinued and why there's so many of them on the markets, because not everybody responds to each product the same way.
I'll throw in a couple real quick. One is there is some evidence to suggest that long-term use can cause some cognitive issues. So I would be mindful of that. So if you're at high risk for dementia, you want to, if you have a calcium score test that shows you don't have a lot of plaques, it may be helpful to avoid a statin. In fact, the American Heart Association, as of last year, if you have a 0 calcium score, even if you're diabetic, there is a way to not have to take statins. That's not standard of care. Just want to put that out there. And then there may be a slight increased risk for your blood sugar to be higher on a statin, which is really a shocker, because if you're diabetic, you need to be
Uh-oh.
So did he freeze?
Oh, I thought it was me. Yeah. For me, Dr.
No,
Tony froze. So okay,
I
sorry.
think he's frozen. So
Okay, so I'll go ahead and move forward with some side effects of statins. Anytime you put anything in your body might wonder what it is, and initially do things like you get a headache, right? Because your body's trying to, raise it out. Also, statins can cause long-term headaches. Dr. Doug, I think you hit one good point that statins do impact your muscles, and very rarely, sometimes it can cause muscle dysfunction, even muscle breakdown. So if I'm on a statin and I'm feeling cramps when I start taking the medicine, or I'm feeling weakness or things like that, then I do go back to your doctor and say, hey, call that same day. Don't be like, oh, I'm gonna schedule an appointment in 3 months. Call that same day and say, hey, I started this medication. I'm starting to have cramps, things like that. Your doctor will probably have you come in and take some labs to make sure you're not one of those people that statins impact the muscles, like Dr. Doug was saying. Then this overall feeling like a stomach ache, statins can cause, and during that time when the body is adjusting, some people literally feel like weak and sick during that. So, and it's an unusual, like sometimes I'm tired, it's hot outside, it's summer, what I'm saying, but I feel sicker, like, almost like flu-like, but that's usually when you first started, or along with the muscle cramping and things like that. Muscle cramping, call the doctor same day, say, hey, something's going on, right? Then with the stomach pain, sometimes people have other things like indigestion, nausea. I haven't really heard vomiting, changes in stool. The statin can cause, and it can make you runny, like diarrhea, or sometimes it can make you constipated. And then because all this stuff is going on, sometimes people have trouble sleeping. Dr. Tony was hitting on the fact that statins, you do watch, your kidneys, and you watch your sugars, because statins can impact your blood glucose level very rarely. And then something that I recently saw was urinary tract infections. Those are the ones that I can recall. I'll definitely, continue to look into. Oh, and I forgot one. When you first start taking statins, you do usually check your labs to make sure your liver, that kind of processes a lot of this stuff, isn't impacted. Dr. Tony?
Okay.
You back?
Yeah.
Yeah, just
take it away.
To add is that, and you may have said this, I'm not a huge fan of statins, but I have patients on statins. So I if you're high risk, let's just say you do a calcium score test and it's not 0, but it's like 500 or 1,000. There's evidence to suggest very high risk people who have already had a heart attack, already had a stroke, those people tend to benefit more than people who are considered lower risk. But keep in mind that a person who has diabetes is considered at the same risk of having a heart attack as a person who's already had a heart attack. So that's why they automatically want a diabetic to be on a statin. My approach in clinic is, let's reverse your type 2 diabetes. Let's reverse it, and then you'll remove that risk. And then if you remove that risk, we can get you off your diabetes medicines and ultimately off your statin.
Outstanding. Well, we do have a couple more questions. Go ahead, Maya.
Dr. Tony, not only I love what you said. It not only works for diabetes. If you have a lifestyle that includes proper nutrition, like some of the high blood pressure and stuff like that, some of it does come running families and stuff like that, but for a lot of reasons, right? Look at what's around us. It's not just, oh, it was genetic. I'm just, but a lot of people are on statins because of the things that we're putting in our bodies, right? So back to what you said, one of the great ways of controlling cholesterol is to watch what I eat and eat things that, like vegetables that are not fried, things like that. Staying away from red meat, staying away from a lot of eggs and shellfish and things like that. A lot of the curdly custard things, making sure I eat veggies, eat life, essentially. That's a great way to add to your statin and your cholesterol control regimen. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. This is brief. I just want to piggyback off of what was being said about side effects in general. There's no medicine, including aspirin, that doesn't have side effects. So if you're going to be a good consumer, a healthcare consumer, you should read the label on any medicine you get to see what the side effects are, what the possible drug interactions are, because there's two things: there's side effects and drug interactions. And so you could take one thing to take care of one particular ailment and then take something, and it could be this bad interaction. So this is also an opportunity to talk about being aware of what you're taking, talking with your healthcare provider about possible drug interactions, because there can be some adverse reactions based upon taking two different drugs that don't agree with each other, and all of a sudden you got a new problem.
All right, outstanding. I do have a couple more questions in reference to cholesterol or cholesterol related items. One question is, what is the major difference between taking a bare aspirin daily and or a statin?
So the purpose of an aspirin is to actually help you prevent blood clots, which can be associated with stroke. And a statin is to help kind of bind that cholesterol in your blood and keep it from being deposited in the blood vessel themselves. So they operate on two different components of not getting enough blood. Two different ends of perspective.
Okay. And Renee Wilson asked the question, is there a... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just
go ahead,
Dr.
Mason.
I was just going to add to what Doug was saying, is that aspirins are also anti-inflammatory agents. And we got to remember that what we're also dealing with is a vascular inflammation, or irritation with some of the foods that we eat and perhaps some of the medications that we take. So there is some degree of the anti-inflammatory part of taking the aspirin that's also at work. And I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Outstanding. Well, Renee Wilson asked the question, is there a safe way to naturally lower the cholesterol?
Yeah, we kind of touched on that just a little bit, in that we said that you can, take supplements like fish oil, CoQ10, niacin, red yeast rice, berberine. But there are also, foods that do a pretty good job. And even though I'm more of an animal-based doc, it is true that I like, if I say vegetables that have fiber, my my goal is to have non-starchy vegetables that have fiber. They will help to bind to cholesterol and help rid it of your body. All those healthy fats and nuts and seeds and salmon and things like that are also helpful, and garlic. So those are the things that come to mind from a natural perspective. More importantly, anything you do to reduce inflammation in your body, less stress, more sleep, eating whole foods, avoiding sugar, processed foods, that's also helpful.
Okay. So Renee also asked the question. The doctor said that red meat is fine, not against cholesterol. So I don't know if there's a word missing in there
No,
that I'm not getting.
I'm gonna comment on that because that's a very important topic. Obviously, I'm damn near, excuse my French, a carnivore, so it can't be bad if I'm eating red meat like that, right? Well, the thing that's led to a lot of confusion about red meat, and I think most of us were trained to fear and demonize red meat, although the College of the American College of Cardiology has
Cardiology.
stated that is not a problem. Saturated fat does not cause heart disease, et cetera. Again, there's a lot of controversy, and I think me and Dr. Mason disagree on this. Now, having said that, the reason why a lot of the studies suggest red meat is harmful because there's something called healthy user bias and unhealthy user bias. So when you do these large observational studies which show that red meat is harmful, what they don't factor in is that the people who tend to, the guys hanging out at the bars consuming red meat tend to be unhealthy guys. They tend to, what do they eat with the red meat? A lot of unhealthy things. They tend not to exercise. They tend to be obese, etc. So those types of confounding variables, we call them, or issues that they don't factor in, give us this impression. But when you look at randomized controlled trials, real research studies, it looks like it's not harmful. So I think that's why the College of Cardiology actually made a statement that it wasn't harmful. But you're going to continue to hear mixed messages about it. It's not mainstream yet that it's not harmful, but that's why there's a lot of confusion. So if you go see a traditional doc these days, they're going to say, avoid the red meat, eat a lot of fiber, eat a lot of vegetables, eat a lot of fruit, and they've really demonized saturated fat and red meat, but that's been, in my opinion, debunked. But again, it's still controversial in many people's eyes, not in Dr. Hampton's eyes.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I have to jump in here.
Of course, I expect you to.
Yeah. We have our respectful disagreement about these things, and I understand what you're saying, but I would also say that people need to understand that I would rather focus on the stuff that I know is good for you to eat than for things that there may be questions. And one of the things that I used to have with the erectile dysfunction group, I had a picture of a collection of men all sitting around a round table. And from that table, above that table, they had sausages hanging. They had all kinds of meat that we sliced, processed meats, steaks, and everything else. So I would say that you gotta look at not just one thing, but everything you're eating. And if you're eating a lot of processed meats, we know that especially when you're charring those meats and putting those black marks on them, that that's where some chemicals live that can cause some problems, particularly even cancer. We call them the polyaromatic hydrocarbons for short, for long, I suppose. So I think that we need to know that there are things that are good for us, and no one had any overdose had a problem eating vegetables. So I'm always going to be a proponent of people eating their vegetables because people say, well, "Where's the protein?" But the animal that you're eating didn't eat another animal to get that protein. So the kicker is that it's in the plants. I don't want people to go away thinking you can't get muscles or have what you need to grow those if you don't eat red meats and things of that nature. And lastly, the American Institute for Cancer Research talks about these meats, particularly processed meats, as potentially causing cancer. So I'm going to leave it at that. And but I would say I guide myself very carefully accordingly.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and take the middle road and say that anything in moderation is good. You can drink too much water. I mean, you can consume too much water if
Joe, I
if you
get away with that.
if you really
I
want to
get
know.
away-
So
No, 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 no,
no, no.
no.
Okay, well, but anything, I will say anything in moderation. I think that's what I would urge people to do, because people are going to make their own decisions about what they eat and when they eat. But I would say, you know, just err on the side of caution, and don't eat too much or drink too much of anything.
So I have
Well,
a
Joe,
question.
What?
got to say
Oh,
this.
go right ahead, Doug.
For
Go ahead.
people who are alcoholics, if you're an alcoholic and you say you want to drink in moderation, that's going to be one kind of drinking for you and a totally different kind of drink for somebody else. So that's why I don't like moderation. I'd rather follow Dr. Tony on this one, and let's be prescriptive about what we're saying rather than leaving it to chance like that. Because everything in moderation is not good.
Good point.
So I had a question for Dr.
So,
Tony.
go ahead, Doug.
So
I'm
the
sorry.
question is, if we're going to eat meat, are there certain ways of preparing it that are healthy and some that are less healthy than others?
Yeah, I think.
Raw
Yeah,
or cooked, boiled, broiled, or fried.
yeah, I think that's why what Dr. Mason said about processed meat is true. Like, so the less processed the meat is, going back to those, healthy. Let's talk about healthy user bias, right? So a healthy user bias is a person who will have a steak, but they may not overchar it. A healthy user bias may be a person who prepares their steak by maybe marinating it, and that'll help. So I think not charring food is important. I think making sure that even how you store it, because if you let meat hang out too long and it gets bacteria on it, that can cause harm as well. So I do think that the way you prepare your meat, the way you raise your meat, now a lot of people can't afford, pasture raised, grass fed, because if it's a piece of beef that was, raised properly, and maybe in a regenerative farming setting where they were allowed to graze and do all of those things, that type of beef is going to have omega-3 that the farm raised beef is not going to have. So I think the prep is important. I think how it's raised is important. And those healthy people tend to eat it the right way, where the people who are not as healthy tend to grab the burger at the fast food. It's still beef, but it's the type that'll be impactful. One of the things that I learned, I'll be going to Keto Orlando in a few weeks. I'll probably talk about transitioning from my previous dietary pattern to my current dietary pattern. And what we have to understand is that a lot of the information that we're consuming is not exactly what we thought. So if you listen to a low fat documentary like What the Health, and then you look at another one that's like, fat fiction, they're completely different methodologies and different opinions about all of these issues. So I think I kind of lean towards Harrington in a way, in terms of, listen to your body. If you're not being harmed, your metrics that you're measuring in your blood are doing pretty good. Like I actually don't tolerate plants after being a vegetarian for 8 years. It irritates my stomach. So I do better with animals. So I try to look at my patients and say, what's best for them? And for some of them, I have patients who are plant-based. I have patients who are carnivore, and obviously those in between. But a lot of places on the planet that eat meat are doing okay, like Hong Kong. The Arctic countries, where they eat a lot of fish, don't eat a lot of vegetables and fruit, they're doing okay in the Arctic. They don't really have access to those types, so they eat a lot of fish like a bear. So I think we have to kind of be open to both perspectives. I want to live in a world where we can actually be okay with both ideologies, and individuals choose what's best for them. Hopefully we'll invent a test one day that can look at our genes and our current state and make the best recommendation. But the best way to know what's best for you is to measure things and to see what your body does to respond to it.
know we're all having a great. Oh, go ahead. Hey, Nikki.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was just going to
Go,
say,
go
where's
ahead. You were talking.
who, me? I was just going
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
say, all others must have data, and the data must be verifiable. And we've got to get that data in a way that it doesn't create an unnecessary bias one way or another. And that I think is what I think all of us would probably agree is necessary. And we've got to realize that in all the medicines that we take, none of those medicines will ever cure us of mostly none of those medicines will never cure us of a problem. They will help us manage it, but not cure it. And that's why one of these days we'll have a conversation on this show about that difference and how we can move to doing some things that either help us keep from getting the medicine, the diet, the things that medicines we're taking, or how we can change what we do to eliminate some of the medications that we're taking, because the medications themselves have side effects that we need to be concerned about. I'm not saying don't take your
All
medicine.
right,
Don't say it. Not saying
Dr. Green.
Oh, you were. I know you. You were having some technical difficulties. I was gonna say, hey, I know we had some more questions. It's 8:03. I didn't know kind of what the next plan was, Dr. Doug. If you want to thank the congressman, thank Nikki. But now that you're
So
here, if you want to keep it going, let's keep it going.
oh no, we're going to grab those quick questions, but we just want to remind everybody we don't want anyone leaving. As Dr. Mason said, we don't want you to leave not taking your medicine. We don't want you to leave not having a conversation with your doctors. We don't want you to go have an AA meeting at the bar, and we don't want you to diet and or live it inside the buffet. That's not what we're saying. So when he talks about moderation, even though I mean, that's what they're telling you. Don't go to the buffet and eat all the red meat and just say the doctor said it was okay. So we don't want you to leave here with that. When they talked about the drinking, we don't want you to go have an AA meeting at the bar. That's not what we're talking about. What we're just telling you is just have those conversations with your doctors. Let's do that. And I'm gonna take this last question, which is, hello everyone. How do you feel about zero drinks like Sprite Zero? And this is from Amp MC. Sprite Zero. Just drink water. But that's just my opinion. Go right ahead. Somebody attack it.
I'll only say that. So this is when you have to kind of think about our colleague Harrington, right? So Joe would say, in moderation, and I actually agree with him. I'm gonna tell you why. Sprite Zero, Coke Zero, it's all garbage. It's all highly processed garbage. So why would you ever put that garbage in your body? Well, you may put it in your body if you're transitioning from the regular Sprite or the regular Coke and you're trying to not have a sugar spike. I have seen invariably that my diabetics who eat or drink the zero sodas, their sugars don't spike. So I would prefer to transition them because they're like addicted from the regular soda to the zero sodas, and then eventually back to what Nikki said, which is water. So I think it's okay as a transition tool. It's not a health food, and you'll see a lot of people who are not at their ideal body weight drinking a ton of diet sodas, and yet they're still struggling. So I don't think that's the answer. But if you're transitioning from a diabetes perspective, I think it's a reasonable transition, but do not stay in that lane.
All right. Anyone else wants to comment on the old Sprite Zero question?
well, you got to remember. I think Dr. Hampton answered it very nicely. I would just say that you got to remember that a lot of these drinks, not those zeros, but the other ones, the normal calorie ones, which created your addiction in the first place, are using things like high fructose corn syrup in many cases before you get to the zero calorie ones. And this high fructose corn syrup, according to Dr. Lustig, activates the same centers in the brain as does cocaine. So the sugar addiction is real, and we want you to make sure that you understand that it's real. And I applaud anyone who's making a transition away from that to, getting to what we really need, and that's just water.
Well, Amp MC says, okay, I will continue with my lemon and water. So very good. Put some ice in it too. A lot of ice. It just makes it even taste better. Just double a lot of ice over in there. Well, I know you guys hate to hear me say this, but it's our time. It's our time. We're going to go around our panel and we're going to say our until next Monday. So our until next Mondays. And we're going to, hey, Alpha. I see Alpha there. Hey, Alpha.
Here, I'm trying to get her down. I'm sorry. Hey, Alvin.
Hey, Alpha. So we're going to start with Doug. Doug, you're until next Monday.
Well, thank you, Nikki. All I'm going to say is the heat wave is here and it's going to stay. We can anticipate more hot weather coming in the future. So that means be careful when you're outside, wearing the hat, and drinking lots of water.
Outstanding. And you know what, Doug? I want to dovetail on that really quickly. If you live in Chicago, just want to remind everyone of cooling centers. There are cooling centers in all of our libraries, in our hospitals, and our police stations. So we just want to make sure that you are aware of our cooling centers. If by any chance there's a senior or someone that is not mobile that you may know, please check on them. Let's use our phone trees to check on our families who we have not talked to in a while or who we have not seen. So let's make sure that we do that just as well. So let's place a phone call. If someone is dropped in your spirit and they on your mind, please place a phone call. If you know of seniors that are in a building or something, please make sure that you check on them when we have these type of heat situations. If you know that there is no type of air conditioning there, and just check on them anyway. And if you are in a facility where you do not have any type of air, please make sure that you contact your alderman's office so they can aid you with that. So thank you so very much. Don't forget cooling centers. It just wrings my heart when I hear on the news that we lost people due to things such as this. So let's just be proactive. Let's continue to be proactive and work together. Dr. James Miller, you're until next Monday.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit to what Doug was talking about in terms of the heat and our economic condition. There are a lot of people that are having a lot of hardship in terms of being able to pay their light bills and those kinds of things. And when that happens, people will cut their air condition off, trying to conserve and trying not to increase their bill. But this is not the time to do that. When it's going to be hot and it's going to be dry. So this is not the time to conserve energy. This is the time to give your body and your system, your house, what it needs, which is cooling.
You are absolutely right. It is ice cold in my house and it's going to stay this way. And I will be selling shoes to make sure that it does. Joe Harrington, you're until next Monday.
Well, I'm going to make it simple and use a statement that people I know have heard before, which summarizes everything we've said this evening. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Outstanding, Joe, and thank you so very much. Kim Sutton is here and she says happy Monday. And also Sunny Eye says, thank you, doctors, for your great public service. You are all making a difference with this type of weekly streaming. Thank you so much, Sunny. Dr. Maya Green, you're until next Monday.
Until next Monday is a couple of things on my mind. What Dr. Doug said about keeping ourselves and our tribe cool, making sure we look out for each other. We have COVID and a couple of other things that are on the horizon. And so remember, wash those hands, hold hands, don't forget to get that thumb. And then when we go into mask, I don't know if we want to wait for everybody else to tell us to wear masks, but if you see COVID popping up in your neighborhood, over the nose, under the chin, you don't have to wait for anybody, make it happen for yourself and your tribe. And then I'm looking forward to, on the agenda next Monday, we're going to keep it going with what Dr. Terry Mason was keeping at the forefront, which is what's going on in the Black community and how we stabilize ourselves from internal, external hatred, societal stereotypes of the Black community and how we're going to come out of it. I think, this conversation was great, so great. And I just want to keep it in the forefront. And so I'm going to rather Dr. Mason, I know people are like, oh, Dr. Mason's gonna bring it. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna do some research. I'm gonna bring up a topic about it next week. So excited for the community. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so very much. Remember to formulate your questions. You can send them early. I actually go through them all. So remember, you can also send them early just as well. You can inbox them or you can email them to us. Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
Until Mondays, I want everybody to know that I love Mr. Harrington. We go back a long, long way, and it just hit a little button of mine when we said about moderation because I hear it so much, and I've seen it create a lot of damage with people because moderation, one group of people is really overage in others. So I just wanted us to be clear about that because you don't always moderate. But other than that, I'm always glad to be a part of this, and I thank the Congressman and Nikki for making this available, and realize that we may disagree sometimes, but we will never be disagreeable on this show. So have a great day and evening.
Outstanding, outstanding. Dr. Hampton, you're until next Monday.
Well, I just want everyone to kind of be less fearful. A lot of times when we have our back and forth, it creates confusion. And I want to just be clear, even when you go back to what has led to different ways of thinking. For example, when the concept of the blue zones was created in 2005 in places like Italy, Greece, Japan, I think Loma Linda, California, and Costa Rica, these are places that were thought to be places where you have centenarians, people who live to 100. And what they found is that in those groups, they found that they did live to 100. But what's not clear, well, actually, what's clear to me is that when you look at the research, there are some animal-based eating in all of those countries except for Loma Linda, California. So the first thing is, you can actually eat plant-based and live a very long life, clearly, because Loma Linda, California proves that. But you can also live a long life if you eat animal-based, because Hong Kong and Iceland proves that. So I think it's important to understand that it's not just the plants or the animals that determine your longevity. It's everything else that you do. Do you have people around you who care about you? Do you have a sense of community and you don't feel isolated? Do you make sure that you get adequate sleep and reduce your stress? Do you get out in nature and enjoy nature like we're doing in Chicago with this great weather? And if you do those things really well, you actually will probably live the full life you've always desired. So don't get too caught up in the details. Avoid sugar, processed food, seed oils, and eat real food. And if you do that and you move your body and you do all these other things I'm sharing, I think you're going to do really well. So don't get so stressed about this that you end up hurting yourself from the stress. And if you do that, I think you'll achieve your goal and hopefully move towards the health you've always wanted.
Outstanding. Thank you so very much. I know the congressman had to step away for just a moment, so I'm unsure if he's made it back yet. But what I want to do is make just a few announcements really quickly. So I want to remind everyone here, actually want to share with everyone here that the congressman has been doing a youth listening tour. It's a youth listening tour. We will be in the Inglewood area on August 3rd. I will make sure that I post that information here for you to bring your youth out so we can listen to them. It's a part of our listening tour. So we can see what our youth has to say. So remember, our next listening tour will be August 3rd. It will be over in the Inglewood area, and I will make sure that I post that information. Also on August 10th, that's Thursday, August 10th, from 3 to 5 p.m., I will be putting a link up with a reservation. We have room for 50 people in the room, and we're inviting you to come out, and there will also be a Zoom link available just as well. A town hall meeting we will be doing called Departing with Dignity. Departing with Dignity. It's a conversation that sometimes we don't want to have, but it's very important to have the conversation about what happens when a patient has to go into palliative care and or hospice and or what happens after? How do we deal with sudden death? If there's a tragedy that happens, what resources are here? Sometimes it hurts my heart when our people have to get together and do a GoFundMe to actually put their family away. There are tons of resources out here, and we want to make sure that those resources are in the room with you, and they'll be sharing those resources with you. Something called palliative care that a lot of you all may not even know about, to hospice care, to actually just planning and being prepared, and how these things can be affordable, and what's out there for you as resources when things like homicides even happen. So we want to make sure that you have that information, and that is August 10th, Thursday, August 10th. And we're going to be at 5838 West Division in their community room. So 5838 West Division, and that's in the Austin area. So we're looking there. August 3rd is our youth listening tour, our next day for our youth listening tour. And then our Departing with Dignity informational is going to be on August 10th. It's a Thursday, and that information will be posted just as well. And then want to remind everyone about our big event that we always do every August. It's August 19th. It's the Congressman Davis's Back to School Picnic, Parade, and World Health Day. Physicals, immunizations, vaccines, everything is available for you in the park. We give away thousands and thousands of book bags with age-appropriate school supplies in them. Great entertainment, free food, free everything. So join us in Columbus Park on Saturday, August 19th. Well, the congressman hasn't made it back yet, and I know he will be coming back shortly. So just want to remind everybody to see us on next Monday, right here, same bat time, same bat station for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. See you then.
Yeah.